Hello, 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 and welcome into another edition of 8Sports Nightcap right here on 8 News Now on WRC.com, on our Facebook page, and everywhere else that you tune into the show. Thanks so much for tuning in. A busy week, right, across Central Virginia, from college basketball to high school hoops coming to a close. There's a lot going on right now across the sports world. Last week, obviously, we didn't have a show because VCU and Richmond squared off last Tuesday and what ended up being a humongous win for VCU. Richmond kept it a little closer than they did that first meeting when it was a 41-point win for VCU. Richmond, they actually cut it to single digits late in that game. But that's old news. That was a week ago now at this point. Since then, VCU has gone on to win another game, and they're actually in action tonight on the road in Chicago against Duquesne. We'll get into that matchup a little bit tonight during this show, and we'll also talk about some of the other action that's going on, all around Central Virginia, because it's a really busy week. On top of VCU obviously being in action tonight on the road, they're at home on Friday for another sellout against Dayton. That'll be their final regular season game of the year. And Richmond, they still have 2 games left on their schedule as well. And then obviously the A10 tournament comes to the Henrico Sports and Events Center this week as well. That starts tomorrow. Tomorrow morning. VCU, their first matchup will be obviously at 5 o'clock as they'll get their A10 tournament started. Richmond has 1 game left, not 2, excuse me. The men's team, that is, that's against George Mason this Saturday at 6 o'clock. That's at home as well. So really busy week from all of the college basketball taking place, but the high school basketball as well, right? It's tonight marks the start of the state tournament. Coming up tonight at 11 o'clock on 8 News, I'll have the highlights from all the biggest games taking place throughout Central Virginia, even some of the games taking place in the 757 as well. So we'll have full coverage of the state quarterfinals as we move closer to Friday, which will be the state semifinals. And then next week, the Siegel Center's taken over by high school basketball as the state championships begin. So looking forward to that. But let's go ahead and kind of jump into what's going to happen, or rather what we're going to talk about today, and that's none other than the VCU Rams, because they have been incredible this season. It's hard not to talk about VCU when you start, talking about March, right? March is here. It's March 4th. The NCAA Tournament is on the horizon, and it's hard not to get excited about VCU because they're in the tournament. Unless they lose their next 3 games, I think VCU is probably as a secure at-large bid. Right now, Joe Lenardi has them as a bubble team, if you will. A little bit. He has them currently as a 10th seed, which is a little better than what we saw a couple of weeks ago before that George Mason game. In fact, I think I can show you here exactly. This is the ESPN bracketology. Again, this is just one guy's opinion, but he's been right a lot. He's a great source for kind of giving an idea of who's secure and who's not so secure. And right now, right here, he's got VCU as a 10th seed taking on Kansas in Cleveland as the automatic qualifier for the A10. So what that means is, each conference gets their automatic qualifier. So, like for the SWAC, it'll be Alabama A&M or something, and they get their tournament bid. For the A10, right now, he only has it as a 1 big bid league, which is what it was last year. Not normally how it is. Normally the A10, you think back to 5 or 6 years ago, they always had 3 or 4 or 5 teams in. Maybe not 5, but at least, 3 or 2 teams in. Right now, the way it sits is it's just VCU getting in. So if there is a Cinderella story, a lot of people like St. Joseph's in the A10 tournament because they've been hot recently. Let's say they get into the tournament. VCU then kind of finds themselves on this bubble, right, like they were for the entire season. They were sitting first 4 out, next 4 out for what felt like the entire season until the last few wins. Finally, they've been bumped up a little bit. They have a great net rating on top of their love now from Joe Lenardi and the other guys that are making brackets. He was picked, or rather, VCU was picked 25th in the USA Today coaches poll, and they were 26th in the AP poll. In fact, one voter had VCU ranked as high as 15th, and I can show you that right here. AP basketball poll breakdown. If you ever want to check this out for yourself, it's a great source to kind of give you an idea of what the country is thinking about where your team sits. And looking at VCU, sitting at 24-5 on the season, it's the highest they've been ranked all year. Currently looking at 26th in the country. One voter has them 15th, 4 had them 21st. Another 22nd, you can read here, 25th by a lot of guys. About half of the voters have VCU inside the top 25. They finish sitting at 26th. And if they win these last 2 games, they'll go into the A10 tournament as a tournament team, and deservingly so, as a top 25 team, deservingly so. I mean, they're having one of their best conference seasons in school history. I mean, think back to all these great teams that VCU has had. Oddly enough, though, they haven't been ranked inside the top 25 all that many times. In fact, only 5 seasons ever has VCU been ranked inside of the top 25, dating back to the 1980s. And this year's team, obviously one of those teams that could be, considered a top 25 team. And I think the reason there's so much excitement around VCU is because they're a type of team that I think a lot of these experts think could make a run in the NCAA tournament. I mean, you look back to, these great teams that have made runs over the years. St. Petersburg comes to mind recently. They're teams that played good defense and shot the 3-ball well, and that is what VCU has been doing. They've been shooting the lights out. Jack Clark in February, 20 for 31. That's the best in the country, and that's after earlier this season he was 37 for 40. Missed threes, so he only made like 3% of his shots coming into, or that was back in December, and then in February he's been unbelievable. Max Shulga looks like the A10 player of the year. I don't see how you don't give it to him. He's been the best player on the best team all season long. He's top 5 in every category. He's not first in any, but he's been unbelievable. And that guy right there, Luke Bamboye, that's Christian Furman, but Luke Bamboye has been incredible during this run as well. He had 17 points in VCU's win over Davidson this past weekend. That win over Davidson was 80-56, just another one of those lopsided wins for VCU. And they've got, success, contribution, I think was the word I was looking for, from everybody. Phil Russell has been all over the place. Joe Bamasil has been incredible. I mean, their bench goes so deep. Zeb Jackson's been great. I mean, this VCU team has 8 or 9 guys easy that can come in and not just produce minutes, but produce scoring and defense. Not to mention, some of the freshmen that have been able to come in and really contribute to this team. Brandon Jennings from St. Christopher has been a great, 6th or 7th man that can come in and play some really good defense for Ryan Odom and his squad. And this is all culminating in what could be a really fun March for VCU. Right, if they win tonight at Duquesne, which they should. Duquesne is 13-16 on the season. They're 8-8 in conference play. They have won their last 2 games, but VCU's 14-2 in the conference. I mean, they're having their best conference slate in school history. I mean, they've just been absolutely unbelievable. And if they can win tonight, they actually secure the A10 regular season championship, considering they have the tiebreaker on George Mason. I think the way they'll do it, they'll call them co-regular season champs. But they beat George Mason heads up, and they should, I believe, that they'll get the 1 seed in the A10 tournament as long as they win tonight, as they sit 1 game ahead of George Mason, who has 2 games left. They'll be in action, I think, tomorrow, and then, of course, they're coming to Richmond on Saturday to play the Spiders. But VCU's, they're looking like the top team in the A10. They'll have the top seed, and then they'll find themselves in D.C. with 3 games to play, right? If they want to claim an A10 tournament championship, the quarterfinal, semifinal, and then the final. And the reason I bring this up is because they've won 8 games in a row. They have more confidence than ever. And I don't want to say you should try to lose a game, but what I will say, going into the A10 tournament next weekend, if VCU loses a game, I don't think that you Ram fans out there should be that upset. If anything, if they lose a game, they'll get a little extra rest. They'll probably go a little harder at practice, right? That would be a punch in the mouth. If you're the 1 seed and you go into DC, the A10 tournament, expecting to win a championship, and you lose your first game or your second game for that matter, that's going to be a punch in the mouth. That's going to be a wake-up call that, hey, maybe we aren't as good as we thought. Maybe just because we beat the last 5 teams we've played by a combined 300 points or whatever it is, that it's not all fine and dandy over on Broad Street. And maybe they practice a little harder, get ready for that NCAA tournament a little better, and get ready to make a run. Because in my eyes, winning the A-10 tournament doesn't do much other than put a banner up in the ceiling. Now, I can guarantee you that none of the players or the coaches will agree with me on this, that it's not a big deal to win an A-10 tournament, because it would be. It would be fantastic for this team, but I truly believe that this VCU team could go much further than just winning an A-10 tournament. I think that they are a second weekend team in this NCAA tournament, the way they've played on defense, the way they've shot the three ball, the way they have been able to force turnovers, the way they've gotten offensive rebounds all season long. This is a second weekend team in the NCAA tournament. And the only thing that worries me about that is playing 3 games in 3 days in D.C., and you go into the NCAA tournament with a little fatigue. Now, what it would do if they were to win is probably raise up their seeding. Right now, Lenardi has them as a 10 seed. They'd probably move up to the 8 or 9 seed. And, maybe it makes your first round game a little easier. But who wants to face off against Auburn? Who wants to face off against Duke? Who wants to face off against Tennessee or Houston? Not me. That's for sure. And if you raise your stock anymore, you're looking at an 8-9 seed, and you're looking at a second-round loss to one of the best teams in the country. Whereas if you do manage to find yourself as a 10th seed, 11th seed, probably where they're slated right now, or if they'd lose, they'd probably be an 11th seed. Your matchups looked a little better. A St. John's team, Wisconsin, Texas Tech. I think those are teams that, VCU pairs up much better up against rather than Auburn or Duke for that matter. So call me crazy. I'm not going to say to go out there and try to lose a game, but I don't think it would be a bad idea at all for VCU to try to enter, or not try to, but I don't think it's the end of the world, I think is what I'm trying to say. If VCU does get shocked in the first or second round, I think a couple extra days of rest, and I think, maybe, I don't want to say try to lose a game, but what I will say is that I think VCU has a way to get to the second round of the NCAA tournament, and I think winning the A-10 tournament almost doesn't do them any good. It'll raise their stock. It'll put them up against a 1 seed in the tournament. But we still got a lot of basketball to play, right? They got to win tonight. I'm sure they plan on winning on Friday against Dayton as well, claiming an outright regular season championship, and I'm sure they want to go and bring some hardware home in D.C. But if you're a fan of the Rams and they do lose next weekend, don't be alarmed. I think it actually sits better for VCU if they were to lose. And again, I know that that's crazy talk, and none of the coaches would agree with me on that point. But that's the one I wanted to make tonight before we turn our attention, because the hype around VCU couldn't be higher, and I think it's deserved. I think this is one of the better VCU teams in easily recent memory, definitely under Odom compared to last year's team and whatnot. They've been so much fun to watch, so much fun to cover, and I'm excited to see what they do this March. A lot's on the horizon, a lot to be excited about, but the main thing is the main thing. Next week, they could bring home an A-10 title if they really wanted to, but loss wouldn't be the end of the world by any means. And speaking of the A-10 tournament, the women's basketball tournament comes to Richmond this weekend, Henrico that is, as that'll be taking place at the Henrico Sports and Event Center for the second year in a row. And it's hard not to talk about the A-10 tournament and not talk about the Richmond Spiders. I mean, we're just in the middle of this thing, right? The guys have ECU, the women have Richmond. I mean, the state is so talented when it comes to basketball, and it kind of runs through the city of Richmond, doesn't it? Because last year, of course, it was the Richmond Spiders that went through the regular season, won a regular season championship. They went into Henrico, won themselves a A-10 tournament championship, and then they made it to the NCAA tournament for the first time in a long time, and of course fell in a 10-7 seed type situation. Entering this A-10 tournament, they're in no matter what. Let's just get that out of the way. They could lose their first game. They're not on the bubble. Richmond is in. They're another team that is ranked, or rather receiving votes by the AP. They're 27th by the AP poll standards as it stands right now in terms of how many points they have. And entering the tournament, I expect them to be ranked in the AP top 25 because I expect them to win the A-10 tournament. They're a team that's kind of in that same situation that I was just talking about. Currently, the ESPN bracketology for the Richmond Spiders have them as a 9 seed in the NCAA tournament. And, of course, what that means is that you would get paired up against a 1 seed, and it just so happens that Richmond, according to ESPN, would be paired up against none other than South Carolina, which I don't think anybody would like to see. Of course, they played Texas earlier this year and played them pretty well. And that's who knocked them out last year as well. But the way they have it right now is Richmond's a 9 seed as the automatic qualifier. They'll take on Illinois, and if they win that matchup, they would then take on the best team in the country for the past decade, it feels like. Well, not a decade, but the past few seasons for sure. In South Carolina, in Columbia. A lot of basketball to be played. I expect them to probably move up to an 8 seed if they win the A-10 tournament. I mean, they've been unbelievable this season. Today, in fact, Aaron Roussel was named the A-10 Coach of the Year. Maggie Dugan was named the A-10 Player of the Year. They had 2 other players on the A-10 first team, and they've been unbelievable, just so impressive what Richmond has been able to do this season. They've won 16 games in a row. That is a school record. On top of the school record for 16 wins in a row, the conference like that they had, they've won more conference games that they have in school history, 17-1 in conference play, and they currently sit at 26-5 on the season. When you go back and what's funny about Richmond is when you go back and look at their schedule, some of the games they lost, you really scratch your head out. I think they lost to Georgetown at one point, which is just so out of the blue because they have not had a good season. But since that moment, Richmond has been able to turn the page, and they have been unbelievable. They've shot the ball well. They've defended well. Teams have tried to be physical with them, and they've been able to win physical games. They've been able to win fast-paced games, slow-paced games. They found a way to win this in 2025 like no other team. They haven't lost in 2025. And their first game in the A-10 tournament will be this Friday at 11 a.m. Of course, I'll be on the sidelines for that. We'll have full coverage on 8 News as always. You see here some highlights from VCU. They did manage to make it into the NCAA tournament, or not the NCAA tournament, excuse me, the A-10 tournament, and they'll be in action on Wednesday. They got one of the earlier matchups as their seeding was not great. In fact, let's pull up that bracket while we're sitting here. Their first game of the tournament is set for Wednesday at 5 o'clock. And, of course, 8 News, I'll be there tomorrow. We'll be live out there for the 6 o'clock show, so you'll be able to see that. Let's see if we can't find the bracket here. Nah, it's not a bracket, but this will do. VCU, the 11th seed, they'll take on the 14th seed LaSalle. They should be able to win that game, actually. The only way VCU is getting into the NCAA tournament this year by far is if they can somehow manage to make a run here and win 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 games in 5 days. Not going to be easy, but they have managed to find some success this year. They're the 11th seed taking on LaSalle at 5 p.m. If they do win that game, they'll be back in action on Thursday at 7:30 to play 6th seed Dayton. And so that's a tough draw for them. And if they win that one, then they'll play the 3rd seed in Davidson. So it's a tough path, to say the least, for the VCU Rams. But, you know, they had some up and downs this season. I really like – that's the wrong button there. Really like the way that they've been able to battle. Obviously, they had to deal with a couple of things with Coach O'Boyle. You know, she had a baby, and they had to go to interim head coach, and they lost so much talent from last year's team as well. But without that, they still managed to make the A-10 tournament and had a pretty good season. So I think you got to tip your hat off to the VCU Rams for the season they did have. As for the Richmond Spiders men's basketball team, I know we didn't really talk about them. As it stands right now, they would be in the A-10 tournament, and I think they're going to get in regardless of how it looks, because they have managed to win some hard-fought games against some good teams. I think what you kind of want to end by just kind of giving praise to Chris Mooney and what he's been able to do with a limited roster. He lost so much talent from last year's regular season championship team, and a lot of the focus was going to be on Delani Hunt at point guard, and a lot of the focus was to kind of rally around him, and he was going to be the focal point of the offense, and then he got hurt, and then George Washington III got hurt, and it's just been injury after injury for Richmond, it seems like. And despite that, they managed to have, not the worst A-10 schedule by any means. You look here at these standings from the men's side of things, and, Richmond finished, they managed to get 5 conference wins, and they're currently holding on to that last spot. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So 13th currently. They sit at 5-12 in the conference, 10-20 overall. It's been a tough slate, but Chris Mooney's done a good job. He's managed to get some wins, and that's not so easy to do in the A-10 by any means with how much talent is on the roster. But that's going to wrap things up here for 8 Sports Nightcap this Tuesday. I wanted to hop on after we weren't able to get on last week and just kind of go over some of these scenarios. Things are shaping up. These seedings are really getting down to the nitty-gritty. Just 2 games left in the regular season for VCU. Obviously, Duquesne tonight. Then they finish their season at home on Broad Street against Dayton for what is already a sellout crowd. They're looking like they're going to be a 10th seed. If they win the A-10 tournament, they might move up to a 9. But as mentioned, that would put you up against the likes of a 1 seed in this second round. So I don't even know if they want to win that game. I think that's kind of the thought I wanted to put in everybody's mind tonight. Again, I know the team won't agree with me on that by any means, but I don't think it's crazy, to say the least. But that's going to wrap things up for 8 Sports. Nightcap tonight, coming up tonight at 11 o'clock, the state quarterfinals tip-off for high school basketball. I have highlights from John Marshall, Atlee. I'm expecting to see some highlights from the 757 as Varina takes on Hampton in the 5A state quarterfinals, and then we'll have some girls' highlights as well from LC Bird, and as well as some highlights from Hopewell as well. A busy night. We're getting highlights from all over the place, and we'll bring it to you tonight with all the scores on 8 News tonight at 11 o'clock. You won't want to miss it. As for tomorrow, we'll see you at the Henrico Sports and Event Center as the VCU Rams look to try to move on to the second round of the A-10 Women's Basketball Championship. Well, that's going to wrap things up. We'll see you next time. Good night, everybody.